Hello, this is Andrea Hendricks, your host of Ignite, a podcast series by Authentico. I am CEO, managing partner of Authentico. Authentico is a full-service multicultural connections, HR, and inclusion agency. Authentico creates meaningful connections to help brands broaden their horizons and reach their business goals. We partner with clients to reach diverse audiences, create work that resonates and gets results, and we help organizations develop successful multicultural workforce strategies and inclusive learning initiatives. Authentico is connected to our partner organization, Tico Productions, which grew out of the values and goals of our founder, CEO, CC Rojas. Our goal and our promise is to deliver success to brands by tapping into the vibrancy of diverse markets and to broaden and advance HR and inclusive initiatives. Ignite podcast series is about creating meaningful dialogue to innovate and culturally inspire. If you look up the meaning of Ignite, it shares focusing your energy and attention to creating and attracting positive outcomes for your life or for your business. This episode will focus on industry best practice from a top leader who I have followed for many, many years, Dr. Cheryl Cooper. So let's talk about what can organizations do to enable progressive strategies around inclusivity and belonging. To keep up to date on what's coming up next, be sure to follow Authentico on our social media channels, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So joining me today, I have the distinct pleasure of introducing Dr. Cheryl Cooper. Dr. Cheryl Cooper is a United States Navy veteran, computer science executive, a transformational thought leader whose work empowers women in technology and STEM careers to claim their agency, amplify their voices, and lead change without waiting for permission from external systems. With more than 2 decades of experience in cybersecurity, technology, and leadership roles across Fortune 100 companies, academic, and community initiatives, she has helped women move from invisibility to influence in industries where their presence has too often been overlooked. An accomplished author, her works include Breaking the Code, Winning Strategies for Women in Cybersecurity, and Tech Hood to Hooded, a Black woman's choice to rise and triumph in the trenches, navigating success for Black professionals. She's also the president of Women in Cybersecurity in Kansas City. She has championed hundreds of underserved students, creating pathways into STEM through mentorship, visibility, and real-world exposure. And she's been honored for numerous awards, one that I'll mention today, a groundbreaking leadership award by STEMI, which recognizes women in STEM who have made significant contributions to the community throughout her 10-year plus career and more. So I could go on and on and on about Dr. Cooper. One of her statements that I always hear her say, a mission that is real clear to her heart, is we must see the girl in a world in which she is usually unseen. And so I am so excited to get started today, to have a conversation with this leader who models the way and champions what is right for all communities in this region and certainly worldwide. Welcome to the show, Dr. Cooper. How are you today?
Oh, hello, Dr. Hendricks, and thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. It feels so great this morning to be speaking with someone who has a shared mission. I'm just really excited to be here and honored to share my perspective on how organizations can move beyond surface level diversity and build cultures of true inclusion and belonging, because this isn't just a workplace conversation that we're having today. It's a leadership challenge, especially now as we see programs being dismantled and bias quietly embedded into the tools that we use every day. The question isn't whether inclusion matters, it's whether we're designing for it on purpose. And I'm excited to dive into, I'm excited to dive into this conversation, especially Dr. Hendricks. When I speak about, are we designing for it on purpose? It's when we're talking about artificial intelligence.
Yeah, so I think everything that you talked about, we set this up around industry perspectives. And so AI is right in the center of that. And that has great connection with and relevancy with inclusivity and belonging. So can you share, before we get into the nuts and bolts of AI, can you share what inclusion and belonging means to you? Why do you think it's so essential now more than ever?
Well, I think to begin with, it's more about dignity in practice. Inclusion is that intentional act of making space for everyone, not just for presence, but for participation. Belonging is what happens when that space becomes safe. It's safe enough for people to show up fully, where they feel visible, where they feel heard, where they can contribute meaningfully because their perspective is valued, and they can be seen without code switching or shrinking. And right now, that work is more urgent than ever. We're seeing a culture shift that threatens to undo decades of progress. Inclusion and belonging are not political. They are human. They're essential to trust and innovation and retention. And going back into AI, in a world where AI is shaping decisions and bias can be embedded in code, we can't afford to be passive. We must design systems that reflect proportional fairness. And we must teach people, especially women and underrepresented groups, how to lead from the inside out. That's what's going to be important today.
I think you bring up a great point, the past, the present, the future, the past state of how inclusion and belonging looks like. And this is not a conversation about diversity, equity, inclusion. I think you're talking, that's the foundational practice, if you will, that got us here. But I love the fact that you stated that inclusivity and belonging is in everything that we do. And it's not tied to just that. We've got to look at it in a broader context. We have to really make sure that it is seamlessly embedded in all that we do, all industries, communities, and practices. It's not just tied to one piece. And so when you think about that in the space of where you're from, I think that's where you were headed, to help the audience really understand what does this space look like from your perspective in your area of expertise. And you were talking about technology and you were talking about AI. Share your thoughts related to that.
I'd love to, Dr. Hendricks. For our listeners, I've got over 2 decades in cybersecurity and technology. And in this field, when we talk about cybersecurity and AI, the conversation around inclusion and belonging, it's still catching up with the pace of innovation. We're building systems that touch, as you mentioned, every part of our lives, from healthcare to hiring. But too often, the people most affected by those systems aren't at the table when we're designing them. So in cybersecurity and tech, we often focus on protecting the systems, but we don't always protect the people. The same tools that secure data can also reinforce bias if we're not intentional. I want to give an example. I want to give an example of this when we're talking about AI. A strategy that we can use today when we're talking about AI is to identify the bias in the AI systems, especially in how we prompt, right? We call that a prompt when we're asking AI to do something or to provide us with information. We have to remember that AI doesn't have a voice. It only repeats what we say. Okay, so keep that in mind. It doesn't have a voice. It's just repeating what we say. So given this example, if I tell our listeners, write a paragraph about how AI is taking over jobs and replacing people. Now write a paragraph about how AI can help humans unlock creativity and solve global problems. You'll see. Same machine, same algorithm, but the tone, the outcome,
it's different. Yeah.
The emotional impact, completely different. That's the power of human choice. Inclusion in the age of AI means asking whose mindset is shaping the machine.
And so that's a very important because as we think about the evolution of this work of inclusivity and belonging, one of the national research best practices that I lean in on quite some time, and it's one of many, it talks about how we're building communities, building workplaces, building spaces, building systems that in order to get to belonging, we have to look at the between building and belonging, which is bonding and then being able to see or notice what's breaking, what's broken and fix that before we can build, we can bond to better coexist or to better work together to get to belonging. And oftentimes we go from breaking to belonging and miss what's in between, and we're back at the same process again. And I think slowing down a little bit and being intentional about the what we're doing and the why we're doing it helps us get to the belonging outcome that we're all achieving, and everybody wins. It's a win-win situation for that. So I thank you for sharing that example, because sometimes our world, the way that we have been wired, if you will, is go fast. And what I'm hearing you say more of, to get to progressive strategies, we need to slow down just a little bit and ask critical questions of the why and what and the who it's going to help before we get to the end result of belonging or the outcome that we're trying to achieve. Go into greater detail for us around that journey of inclusive, progressive strategies. What does that mean for you in your world to have progressive strategies to get to a greater outcome of belonging? And then if you want to share an impactful project or initiative that's underway that you're leading that showcases that, love to hear that as well.
Thank you for that, Dr. Hendricks. And I do want to add that when we're talking about progressive strategies, we can still apply not engagement surveys, but sentiment surveys to double down on the employee experience. Spectrum assessments from onboarding to exit, because these help us to understand how different groups experience the same workplace differently and allow us to design targeted development programs. Going back into this climate that we're in today, inclusion can't be, as I said, performative. It's got to be intentional, data informed, and we can do that through those sentiment surveys, because the future won't be inclusive by default, right? We're going to have to design it.
Right. Well, I love that. So really putting that creative, innovative hat on. I have that as a part of one of my 6 I's in a book that I wrote on bold inclusion for greatness and innovation, bringing in a new way of thinking around innovative, creative ideas to get at better, greater solutions, and how innovation will drive that if you allow the wisdom of the crowds. And so I love how you put that in place in the work that you do over the past years and certainly now. Any impactful project that you're working on or doing? I know there's so many. I heard of one the other day, but you want to share one thing that you're doing to really elevate this and help organizations or help your organization get to belonging faster, quicker?
Oh, wow. Yes, there are so many things that are going on. There's even one initiative that I really admire, and it's one that's being done by actually Deloitte. They have something called Inclusion Strategy for Gender Equity, and where they have senior leaders mentoring other women, especially in these male-dominated places where they've launched this mentorship program that connects women with senior leaders and helps them to guide their career. And that's been an excellent program. Going back to those sentiment surveys, that's another impactful initiative. Why? Because it uncovers hidden barriers to inclusion that data alone can't show. So before we can roll out those programs, we need to understand the soil we're planning in, and those surveys help us uncover those pockets of resistance or misunderstanding. But one of the things that I hone in on, Dr. Hendricks, and as you know of, it's the woman has to, through leadership, self-advocacy, through her own agency, she will have to lead. She can no longer rely on systems and policies for equity. Going back to my industry that I'm in, and even when we look at STEM, when we look across 146 nations, women in STEM careers are only represented at 29%. Women in the AI profession only make up 22%. Those aren't just statistics. That's a signal. It signals that women can't afford to wait on policy to create impact. We've got to depend on our own agency and advocacy and learn how to navigate our careers. Not waiting on technology to hand us a seat at the table. It's through our own agency.
We had the pipeline perspective of mentorship, of sponsorship, and allyship relationship. Well, agency kind of wraps around that, where I call this voice, visibility, and vision, where individuals really need to really use their voice, have great visibility, and then champion your vision. And that means letting people know who you are so that they can help you where you are. And so I love when you talk about agency in the work that you do, how powerful that is of giving women who are in an industry an opportunity, whether it's this decade or the next decade or 50 years down the road. How can you be an agent for your own change to be successful in the work that you do? So how do you advocate? You are an agent of change, an agency kind of philosophy, a practice that you really showcase in your work. And certainly as you go speak around the world, what's one thing that you do to advocate for inclusivity in the space that you're in? And then what advice do you have for the listeners on how to do that? Maybe give one tool or tip.
Okay. Well, first, I'd like to thank you, Dr. Hendricks, for further defining what exactly is agency. As you mentioned, I think for myself, I assume that. But yeah, agency is your ability to make intentional choices and to act on those, that personal agency, owning your own decisions, owning your voice. And how I do this is teaching the woman, but it doesn't have to just be the woman, to own your voice, no longer waiting on external systems or policies for change or to break barriers for you. So what I do, and the tip that I have, is that we have to recognize the power of our own voice. Learn how to use our own voice as bankable influence to advocate for change and to advocate for ourselves.
Yeah, I think that's powerful. Yeah. If you were thinking about my best practice tool, a tip, a book. Now, we know that you have books already. You're an author. Is there anything that you would share in addition to the books that I mentioned, you being an author of, a tip, a tool, resource, or practice that you say, the listeners, you must do this to advance this work around this area? What would be that tool, tip, practice, or resource?
My tip would be, don't wait for a policy to tell you what inclusion looks like. Don't wait for a policy to tell you what to do that you know is right. Start with how you speak. Begin to learn how to use your voice, how you listen, and how you lead, because culture is built in small moments, and every one of us has that power to shape it.
The more you get out there, the more you do it, you hone that skill, you hone that confidence, and you are ready to take on whatever you need to do. So the listeners, you heard Dr. Cheryl Cooper share, practice that confidence, get out there and build that muscle, if you will, so that you can continue to build capacity in this space. Any concluding or final thoughts?
It's just to talk about our voice and building confidence. Change starts with truth telling. As you have said, tell it, label it, speak openly about inequities, bias, and exclusion. Silence protects systems. Voice will disrupt them. That's the reason why it's important to learn how to use your voice.
Yeah, tell your story, use your voice. I love that. Well, thank you so much for your insightful perspective. I know everyone listening gleaned industry best practice and approaches to this very topic. So as we leave today, I wanted to share with you individuals who could give us quick nuggets on how to shape this area. I hope that you take a moment and think about what you've heard today and what you've learned today. And I encourage you to continue to climb in this space. It matters. It makes a difference. We look forward to having you engaged in future programs. See you next time. Go out and ignite your strategies.